All right, this is the video for lesson 2.3. So first of all, we just start off with a quick recap of things that we learned in the first two lessons regarding slope and slope-intercept form. So just a reminder, for horizontal and vertical lines, you can use the picture from Mr. Slope Guy to remember which is 0 and which is undefined. But really, I want you to think about Hoy and Vux whenever you see vertical and horizontal lines. So the middle part tells you exactly what the slope is going to be. So for a horizontal line, we're looking at 0 slope. And for a vertical line, we're looking at the letter U to remind us of undefined. So as we get to question 2, what is the slope of a horizontal line? So I'm thinking of seeing my H, I'm thinking of Hoy, and therefore I'm choosing that 0 there because it looks like the letter O. Slope for a vertical line, so I see my V, so I'm thinking of Vux for this question. So I'm picking undefined because that begins with the U. And then just a quick recap of counting squares for finding slope. So we do rise over run. So we rise 2 squares. We run to the right always. So up 2 and over 4. And 2 divided by 4 is 1/2. And simplifying is important because 2 over 4 was not an answer. Now for this one here, we're not actually going to rise. We're actually going to fall. So we're going to go to the opposite. So we're going to go down 3 and then across 1. And -3 divided by 1 is -3. Notice also for these questions, if we do know positive and negative slope, we can already narrow this down to 2 answers. Just like we could here, we knew this was positive slope because it was going up, so we could have ignored these 2 answers down here as well. Now from last lesson, slope-intercept form, the ones that start with y equals, the number in front of the x tells you the slope, and the other number tells you the y-intercept. So as this one asks for the slope would be 2. The number in front of the x tells you the slope. Now, specifically, there is no number here, so that means that it must be 1, or specifically -1, as there's a negative sign. So we'll click on that. And you could then mention the fact that it's the number in front of the x or something to that effect. To find the slope between 2 points, we plug each of these numbers into this formula. So on the top here, I'd have -5 take away 5, which is -10. On the bottom, x2 minus x1, 3, take away -1 is 4, and -10 divided by 4 is the same thing as -5 over 2. If we divide by 2, you probably would need paper for that question. What is the slope of y equals 3? So this only has a single letter, so this is where I use my Hoy again. So it ends in y, Hoy or Vux. Y obviously is in Hoy, so the middle letter is O, which represents 0. And similar for this one. The letter X, just one letter, so we think of those special words, so Vux. So the middle letter is U for undefined, and you could put the same thing in here. You can just mention that it's because of Vux or something to that effect. And then the more complicated question that we saw towards the end of the examples last lesson, which is really what we're going to focus on today, is don't just always pick the number in front of the X for the slope. That only works if it says Y equals. So if it doesn't say Y equals, you've got to make it say Y equals. So for this question, as it's 3y, if we divide everything by 3, that would make it say y equals. So this divided by 3 gives you y, 6x divided by 3 gives you 2x, and 12 divided by 3 would give you 4. So the slope would be 2x, and it didn't ask for this time, but it could ask you for the intercept, that would be 4. And then this is just my slide just to make people wait for a second while people are catching up. So last lesson, we talked about graphing using the idea of slope-intercept form, looking for the number that it starts with or begins with, the number without the x, and then using rise over run to count out where the slope is going to be, and the number in front of the x to help us. And we saw some of these questions last time, but just to remind ourselves, so the number without the x is +1, so that's our y-intercept, and a slope of -3 over 4. We do rise over run. Now, and rise of -3, though, means you go down 3. And then the bottom number, the 4, tells you that you run, and the run is always to the right. And you can do it more than once if you need to. Down 3, across 4, and it would make a nice straight line, which you can join up if you want to. -2/5. That's not easy to see that negative there, unfortunately. It must have just merged in a little bit. I didn't notice that while I was adding it to. Now, the number without the x, though, is the 3. So that's where I start from on the y-axis. 1, 2, 3. -2 over 5, the negative only applies to the top number, not the bottom number. So as I'm doing -2 over 5, that means I go down 2, and then I run 5 squares, and the run again is always to the right. And you could do another dot if you really wanted to. Down 2, and across 5. 3x minus 8. So the number we start from is the number without the x. So -8. I can't quite fit this one in, actually. Let me just scroll down a little bit. There we go. Starting at -8. And the slope is 3. Now, this time it's not a fraction, so we can't just do rise over run straight away. So we need to remember that when it does give us just a single number, we're going to write it over 1. So we're going to put the slope as 3 over 1. So 3 divided by 1, of course, is 3, so it's the same thing. But now we can do rise over run. I can rise 3 squares, and then I can run 1 square. I can rise 3 squares, I can run 1 square, and so on. And I put the little reminder here that this means that you're going up 3 and right 1 as well. X plus 2, so the number without the x tells you where you're going to start from, which is 2. This time when it says x, we've got to remember that x actually means 1x. And like the last question, if it's just a single number, you're going to put it over 1 to make it into a fraction. So you'd go up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1, and so on. And you can join this up with a line as well. So that was what we'd done last lesson, and just a few of those skills we're going to be using again today. So I thought it was worth quickly refreshing those before we get into standard form. So slope-intercept form last lesson is questions that start with y equals. Standard form is the ones that start with x and y on the same side, and we saw some of those towards the end of last lesson. So all the notes are posted in here just so you can see them in one go. So if it doesn't start with y equals, we have to make it start with y equals. And it actually says write the question in slope-intercept form. So like using our rules from Unit 1, when we want to rearrange something, if we want to move it from one side to the other side, we do the opposite. So as it says -2x, I'm going to add 2x to both sides. Be careful here. 7 add 2x is not 9x. I know people tried to do that. This is a number. This is a letter. 7 add 2x is literally just 7 add 2x. And there's the equation of the line, 7 plus 2x, or 2x plus 7 if you prefer to write it that way. But as long as it starts with y equals, we should be okay. If it asks you for the slope, the number in front of the x, and the number without the x would be the y-intercept if they asked for that. 3x plus y equals 4, same thing, doesn't equal y, so rearrange it. So subtract 3x from both sides, and then don't put 1x here. 4 take away 3x is just 4 take away 3x. So the slope, make sure you don't miss the negative sign with the x here. So the slope would be -3, and the y-intercept would be 4. And then from that, you have some questions that you can try just to make sure that you can rearrange them. And if I bring -3x to the side, it would become +3x. So 12 plus 3x, which is the same as that answer there. 4x, if I bring it to the side, becomes -4x. So 12 minus 4x is the same as this option here. And on question 3, if I bring this to the other side, I would get y equals 1. So instead of -2x, it would become +2x. And then we graph using those methods we used last lesson. So the number without the x is where we start from on the y-axis. And a slope of 2, if it's not a fraction, we make it a fraction by putting it over 1. So I rise 2 squares and run 1 square. Rise 2 squares, run 1 square, and so on. So you can carry on drawing the pattern. So that method slope-intercept was really important last lesson, because if it's not in slope-intercept, basically we're going to make it into slope-intercept. So we need to make sure that we know how to do that type of question. The second group of questions start to get slightly more complicated, as in they don't just have a y. Sometimes they'll have like a 4y here. But same idea, we want to move our x's to the other side. So we're going to do the opposite of 12x, which is -12x. And you get 24 minus 12x. And then if we know what 4y is, to find y, remember this means multiply by 4. So the opposite would be to divide by 4. And you divide each of the terms by 4. So the 4's here would cancel. 24 divided by 4 is 6. And -12 divided by 4 is -3. So if it asks you for the slope, -3. And if it asks you for the y-intercept, 6. And if it asks you to graph this, let's start with the number that doesn't have the x next to it, 6. -3, as it's a single number, put it over 1. So -3 over 1 means that I go down 3 and over 1. Down 3 and over 1. And as we'll see later, sometimes the question actually asks us what is the x-intercept for this. So you can actually figure out that it is 2. So that would be an example of an extension question. Same idea, let's move our x's to the side by doing the opposite. So 4 add 3x is just 4 add 3x. if I know 2y, if I divide by 2, I can find out what y is. 4 over 2 is 2, and 3 over 2 is just 3 over 2. It does not simplify. The slope would be 3 over 2, and the y-intercept would be 2. And if we had to graph that, we could look for the number without the x to tell us where to start. And then the 3 over 2 is our slope. So we rise 3 squares and then run 2 squares, and then we can join that up with a straight line as well. Students were then given the chance to practice this one. So I won't go quite through all the steps on this one, but you can certainly try these and use office hours if necessary. But the answer for the first one should be that one there. And same thing, you can try this as well. And if you don't get the answer, you could always come and get some help, but it should be that answer there. So to graph this, I would have to rearrange this first. So it would be y equals -1/2 x plus 5. So that would be the first step for actually doing this question. So once you've checked that, we can start at the number without the x, which is 5. And a slope of -1/2 means I go down 1 and across 2, down 1 and across 2, and so on. Now, I know that activity there can be kind of difficult, and students often will struggle on that. And with the shortened year this year, we are going to be using a little bit more technology, perhaps slightly quicker than we normally would be. The Desmos Calculator we're allowed to use on the SOL. We like students to be able to do questions by hand first because there are some important skills they can learn there. But we're also going to bail students out just a little bit this year. And we're going to remind students, you can actually do these questions in Desmos as well. So most of our questions are going to be multiple choice questions. So I put 4 answers down the side here and given a question and asked which is which. Now the line here shows me that I've actually plotted this here. Now to find out if it is this answer, if I switch this on, clearly you can see this is a totally different line. And I can go through all the questions one at a time until I find the one. Notice it changed color. If I switch it off and then switch it back, you can see that it's the same line because it just drew over the top. So if we're in Desmos, that's another way we can answer questions. We can type in the question, we can type in each answer choice and then see which one actually gives us the correct answer. To get the fraction, we just use the slash symbol. And after you've typed in the bottom number, use the right arrow key to show that you've finished entering the fraction. So that's going to be a really powerful method. Now, we mentioned earlier, they are going to ask other questions like, what is the intercept? Now, you can see that it goes through the x-axis at 3 here. You can actually click on it, and it will actually tell you exactly what it is as well. So you could see this as x equals 3. Now, actually, if I click that, it just draws a line through it. This is really just supposed to represent a multiple choice question more than anything else. But if you're not sure, you could do that. And you could look, does it just go through the same point or does it not go through the same point? There we go. That one's good. And in terms of answering the question, that's what you're going to show me, actually. So I know you did this correct. What is the slope of this? So this is where we have to count the squares. Notice some of these questions here, I actually have positive and negative answers here as well. I got negative slopes, I got positive slopes. Really, I just want to show, is it -6, 6, -2, or 2? So as it's going down, I know it's negative slope, and it goes down 2, and across 1. So the slope would be -2. Like I said, this is not really a multiple choice question, but if I type in -2x, because I know the number in front of the x is a slope, hopefully you guys can see these have the same slope, they're just in a slightly different position. Whereas obviously if I click on a positive slope, you can see it's totally the wrong direction. So we can use those tools to help us, but really we're going down 2 and across 1, and -2 over 1 would get us to that answer. Now for this one's not quite so easy because I actually end up with a decimal here. Now, as you type these into Desmos, supposing this was your multiple choice answers, if you type them into Desmos, it will actually convert it to a fraction to a decimal for you. So you can actually see which is the correct answer here. So it would actually be -4/3. So Desmos is useful for converting between fractions and decimals as well if we're not sure. Slope for this one, I can't quite see this one perfectly, so I'm going to move down a little bit. And you can drag just like you would on a computer screen or on your phone if you want to see a slightly different part of this. So for this one here, what is the slope? I can see these lines here. I can see this as positive slope, so I know it's between these two. And once again, really, I'm just looking at the number, not the value here, but that's going to help me in a second. So up 1, 2, 3, and then across 2. So it should be 3/2. And hopefully when you click on that, you can see it's the same slope, but it's just in a slightly different position. And then from there, this is our last exercise for students to try. This one, the graph's already been drawn. I've typed in the answers already, so you can actually check. That one's not the same. That one appears to be the same. Did it change color? Yeah, you can see that it changed color. You have to make sure it doesn't just appear to the side over here as well. So there we go, we found that answer. What is the slope for this one? So it looks like I might be counting some squares again. I can see it's negative, so I know it's between these two because it's going downwards. So it looks like it goes down 3 and then across 4. So I'm going to pick -3/4. I know this is to the side a little bit. This is not really multiple choice, but it's just to help you figure out what the question is. But you can see it's the same slope for this. What is the x-intercept? If we move across, we can see that it's clearly 8. If you click it again, there you go. You can see that it's 8 for sure. And then to make sure students do understand, I've actually got them to actually physically answer the questions like they would on the test. So you could type in the question, you can type in each answer, and you can check to see how you actually do. That should do it for this video, actually. I think that covers pretty everything. I know that was kind of a longer video, but there's a few things in there. But certainly Desmos is a useful tool for students who are struggling. It helps them graph and gets a good visual of what questions actually look like.